right? Everybody would agree with that. I think probably if we look back from the last 50 to 60 years, it's very, very crazy. I think also George will probably share some data around that as well. And just a couple of things on why it is so competitive and how you can signal that actually in the market is, first of all, if you look at how do you overcome, the challenge in hiring great talent or diverse talent is looking at your own profession. Yeah, talent professionals right now, talent acquisition professionals in the market are the hottest people, even harder to hire at the moment than engineers. So this is where we get started, right? How do we actually set up our teams internally to then really have the drive, the capacity to really make those growth plans happening? And you see this in different markets. It could be in the Berlin market where a lot of tech companies are locating at the minute, a lot of from the UK, but also very much like, in other markets where every company is doubling their size of the organization at the minute. And you have seen a lot of investments going on in the pandemic where, we paid a lot of good money on tech companies in order to grow and, accelerate their journey. So in the end, what I'm trying to say here is literally, if you see that you're struggling hiring your own team, if you see that struggling reaching out to talent because response rates are constantly dropping, you can only succeed if you have a community, a well-branded personal brand, but also being a well-established leader in order to make those connections and reach out to the talent to actually make them excited and create learning opportunities for them. And I think that's one of the parts that we have seen working at the minute.
It makes a lot of sense. And I think I saw something around investments in hiring technology as well just this morning. That is an excellent proxy for how hard it is for people to hire talent today. The more money comes into hiring technology, the more people have a pain point there. George, do you have some perspective to share on this, given your knowledge of the macro elements of the market?
Yeah, for sure. So exactly right. Competition has never been hotter for tech talent, and by that I'm referring to technical people working in tech companies, non-technical people working in tech companies, and also then thinking about tech people working outside of tech companies, because of course that's all part of the ecosystem, it's all competition. And we can see that in the first half of this year, that hiring through the form of job advertisements has actually been nearly 50% higher than the same period in 2019. So we've not just rebounded from the pandemic, we've really shot through the roof. And that's why we're seeing such sort of hot activity around hiring at the moment, and why we're seeing salaries increasing so dramatically, among other things, for many top tech roles. I mean, that's the case for the UK. It's also the case, obviously a very pertinent point, it's also the case for Europe. The UK has seen much, much higher levels of job advertisements being put out over the last couple of years. In 2020, for example, the UK advertised around 260% more tech jobs than any other country in Europe. But competition from really thriving European markets is also putting pressure on hiring in the UK. And of course, many of the attendees here today, and of course the likes of Beamery, and we're going to be looking right across the world for top talent. So we've seen massive growth in demand. We've not seen quite the same level of growth in supply, and I think that's the crux of the issue there. And of course, there are a number of mechanisms by which we can start to address that, but fundamentally, I think we need a bit of a step change in terms of how we're thinking about that supply. And that very much feeds into the conversation today, because we need to have a total change in perception. So the two things I'd stress, competition and perception. We need to have a total change in perception as to how we start to address these acutely painful skills gaps in the UK. And they're acutely painful for businesses, they're acutely painful for individuals. And this very much does tie into the conversation that we're having today around diversity, because we need to make sure that we are offering opportunities to everyone and making people aware of opportunities to work in tech, as well as changing, I guess, those structures that currently are inhibiting people's ability to do so.
I'm definitely going to go back to George on this question of making opportunities available and thinking about it from a macro perspective, from the perspective of competition, not just at the company level, but at the market level. But yes, this is all strong indicative of the fact that the competition is real, the struggle is real. And so if you're hiring for tech talent, or if you're in a company that hires for tech talent, especially if you're looking to consciously target diverse candidate populations, you're going to have a hard time. And I think it was either you, Ash, or Joanne, you said something about it being a case of not if, but when your business will be affected by the scarcity of this type of talent. Ash, why don't you tell me a little bit about
Sure.
your perspective on this?
Well, I think like the guys have summarized it really well, which is from Matthias and then George, which is ferocious competition. Hiring at the moment is difficult, expensive, slow at best, and that's before you consider the impacts on actually retaining talent in this incredible industry, which is effectively, you know, poaching from each other's finite supply, and so it's a sort of zero-sum game. If you then want to throw diversity into the mix and shift the dial, or maybe representation of gender or ethnic sort of representation in your technology or technical sort of functions, it's even slower, harder, and more expensive to do that, because the supply simply doesn't exist. So, for example, if we look to the traditional sources of workers in the tech industry, i.e. universities and other forms of education, you know, there aren't many women, and there certainly aren't many people of ethnic background studying STEM and computer science and these sort of courses, which are considered to be the natural step towards a career in technology. So I guess the premise that I work on an academy, and I did in the past, is how do you dramatically widen the top of the funnel such that you could appeal to sort of any person from any background, inspire them to consider a role in technology, which is the perception issue George alluded to, and then provide them a pathway to acquire the skills and the job at the end of it, which is the pathway or the access. And I think you've got to go to extraordinary lengths to sort of challenge the supply at the top of the funnel and get people into the jobs if you want to move the dial. I'm happy to expand a bit more on that, but I'm not sure if now's the right point in the conversation.